All right. Welcome to the Gita in Action podcast. My name's Radha, and I'm here with our family of seekers. We are reading through the Bhagavad Gita verse by verse. We're discussing its meaning and its relevance in our lives. And we started this almost 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years in August that we started this journey together. And it's so impactful. It's the highlight of most of our weeks, right, team? So it's really special. We come together and do this together. And today we're starting a new chapter. We are starting chapter 12 today. And this is a small chapter. There's only about 20 verses, and we're going to go through about 7 of them today. So this will be a quick chapter. But again, a very nectarian chapter. So the Gita is often divided into 3 sections. So the first 6 chapters focus more on karma yoga and how action ultimately leads towards bhakti. And then the middle 6 chapters, well, actually, we'll go this last 6 chapters focus more on jnana or knowledge, and how knowledge also culminates in bhakti. And then the middle 6 chapters focus directly on bhakti itself. When we say bhakti, we mean devotion and relationship with God. God, who we call Krishna, which means all attractive. Same God as a Christian God or a Muslim God. So we have one God, all the same. We call God Krishna. It's all attractive. So if we remember where we were in the story, in chapter 10, Arjuna fully accepts Krishna's supreme position. And Krishna explains all of his vibhutis, which vibhutis means these opulences and manifestations throughout creation, these special opulences. Basically, just like all the extraordinary things in the world that reflect the tiny spark of his greatness. And the idea being that when we see things in this world, like in that reference frame, we connect to God. And then Krishna says in that chapter that he sustains the entire universe with just one fragment of himself. And so then after Arjuna hears this, he's inspired to ask, can I actually see this? Can I actually see the universal form? And then that's where we just were in the 11th chapter, where Krishna reveals the whole universal form, which is this overwhelming cosmic manifestation that contains all existence, time, destruction, creation, everything right in front of Arjuna. Actually, just like all around Arjuna. It's like Arjuna standing in the middle of an ocean, and there's just like universe everywhere. It's all he sees, And then after seeing that, Arjuna now has another question, and that's where we're going to start with the 12th chapter. We see there's so many questions in the Gita. So we're coming to another one of Arjuna's questions that he's really asking for our benefit. That's really his questions are really inspired from God from within for the benefit of all people. As we're going on this journey with him, we're learning, we're being transformed, we're deepening our relationship with God. And these are all the little stops, the little nuggets along the way. So now we've arrived at chapter 12, and Arjuna's going to ask about the impersonal aspect of the absolute truth. We call that impersonal aspect Brahman. And when we say impersonal, we mean this idea of oneness, like I'm God, you're God, everything is one. It's like this idea of worshiping the absolute, and it's all pervading impersonal feature. So it doesn't have personality, or it's not a person that we're worshiping as God. It's just this all pervading feature of God, which we understand is a partial understanding of God. Right? And a puppy, I just see you popped on. Good to see you, darling. So this question actually goes back all the way to chapter 9, when Krishna briefly mentioned different ways that people approach him. If we remember there, he talked about some people worship the demigods, some worship the universal form, and then he said some approach the impersonal Brahman conception. And so as we've gone through the Gita in this journey, we've covered worshiping the demigods. We covered worshiping the universal form. So now we've arrived at this last part here, which is the impersonal conception of God, Brahman. Right? This is the remaining question. Like what about people who think the absolute truth is ultimately formless? It's just an all-pervading energy, and that liberation means just merging into that oneness. So this is the question that he's going to ask. And we don't see, chapter 12, it's not like flowing from chapter 11 in a direct linear way, but it's actually continuing this broader conversation that Krishna introduced earlier, and is now unpacking more and more deeply. So we're covering we're like double clicking on different ways that people approach God. And we just double clicked on the universal form. God is the universe. And now we're double clicking on God is this all pervading energy. And this is where we are. So this is we're going to cover this first section. We're going to dive right into it, where Krishna is going to explain why worship of his personal form is ultimately easier and more complete than worship of the impersonal Brahman. That's kind of the focus of the section that we're going to talk about today. And it's very sweet, as always. It's very sweet. And even though this may sound like kind of philosophical, which it is for sure, it's also very relatable to our lives. And we'll get into that more and more. And I think also as we see and understand other paths and other ways to approach God, we really come to appreciate bhakti more and more, because it's so accessible and it's so sweet. And ultimately, it's so much easier and more effective. It's like the elevator right up to relationship with God. So this is where we're going. Before we do that, before we dive into the verses, Shraddhanjali, can you say our prayers for us?
I think Poppy is going to do it today.
Oh, amazing. Poppy, please say our prayers for us.
Hare Krishna. Om Ganatimirandhyasya Gyanjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yana Tasmahi Sri Gurave Namaha. Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swavamiti Namine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuveva cha Patitanam Pavanavayu Vaishnaveya Namo Namo. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Krishna. Our prayers are such a beautiful way to situate us in gratitude before we start really relishing this nectar. We express gratitude for the teachers in our lives who have revealed this knowledge to us, and those who have come before us and lived this knowledge and been examples for us in it. And when we situate ourselves in gratitude before we come together and study this text, it automatically somehow it kind of takes us out of this ego mind, kind of takes us out of the center as we recognize that, hey, it's not us. It's not us. We're not the reason that we're able to understand these texts, and we have a little bit of taste and attraction towards them. It's actually all the credit goes to those who have walked before us and who have paved the way for us to be able to come together and to benefit. And that changes everything. That changes everything. And that becomes like the digestive enzymes for our ability to really assimilate and imbibe these texts. So it's very sweet. And Poppy did that so beautifully. Thank you, Poppy. So we will start with text 1, chapter 12, text 1. I will share my screen. This chapter is titled Devotional Service. So we really just get into the essence here. And when you're ready, Shraddhanjali.
Arjuna inquired, which are considered to be more perfect? Those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested?
Thank you. So this is Arjuna's question. And up until this point, Krishna has explained the personal aspect of the absolute truth. He's explained the impersonal aspect. He's even explained the universal form. And he's described many different kinds of yogis and transcendentalists all throughout the Gita. But now we're really zooming in. We're really understanding which one is recommended and why. And generally speaking, spiritual seekers tend to fall into these two broad categories, personalist and impersonalist, where the personalist is focused on relationship with God, and engaging directly in service to him. And the impersonalist is also spiritual and transcendental, but instead of focusing on God as a person, they meditate on this impersonal Brahman, like the energetic form. If God is like the sun, then his energy is the sun rays, and that's Brahman, like the light, the warmth that emanate from source. Source is God, the person. So that's Brahman, the oneness, the unmanifested, this all-pervading spiritual reality that's beyond material form. And after everything we've just gone through, Krishna's teachings, the revelation of the universal form, all this discussion about devotion and relationship, Arjuna is now asking something very clear. He's asking, which path is ultimately better? What do you recommend? The worship of Krishna as a person, or the worship of impersonal Brahman? And this is important because both paths are considered transcendental, and both paths move someone beyond ordinary material consciousness. So it's not which one's bad and which one's good. It's just which one leads to this deeper and more complete union with you. Who's more perfectly situated in yoga? Those that are devoted to your personal form, or those who are absorbed in this impersonal aspect of the absolute truth? And so Krishna's response is over the next several verses, and it's very direct and it's very personal. And ultimately what it's doing is it's establishing this unique position and beauty of bhakti. We say bhakti is just personal devotion for God. And it explains why relationship with the personal form is ultimately more natural and complete and accessible for the soul. And this is why it's such a gift that we're all here together today and given this knowledge and this opportunity to understand and learn and approach God in this very personal and intimate way, because it makes all the difference. And we'll get into that more and more as we're marching through. So let's move to the second verse. When you're ready, Shraddhanjali.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshiping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be the most perfect."
So that's pretty clear, huh? Pretty clear, pretty direct. He says those who constantly fix their minds on him personally and worship him with transcendental faith are the most perfectly situated in yoga, the most intimately connected with him. And one really important word here that I want to double click on is transcendental faith. Because some impersonal philosophies teach that the worship of God's form is just like a stepping stone, that eventually one goes beyond the personal form and merges into formless or impersonal. So it's not the destination, it's like just a step along the way. But Krishna doesn't describe devotion to him that way here at all. He says that even on the transcendental platform, the devotee continues fixing the mind on him personally and continues worshiping him with transcendental faith. So therefore, the goal of spiritual life is not to eventually outgrow worship of the personal form, or move beyond relationship into impersonality. It's rather, as realization deepens, devotion is deepening, and relationship deepens and love deepens. And this is where we're going with all of this. And Krishna makes this super clear. He says, those who worship him personally with steady transcendental faith are considered by him to be the most intimately united with him. So it's the way and the destination. Bhakti is the process and the destination. The process is loving devotion to God. And ultimately, that's where we're going. That's even our final destination after we transcend this material experience. It's loving devotional service to God, because that's our constitutional position, right? We're servants of God. We get a little bit confused in this world. We end up oftentimes being servants of our ego, servants of our senses. Right? But our original constitutional position is a servant of God. And when we learn to live from that identity, from that eternal identity, even while we're in this material world, we actually experience the utmost connection and fulfillment of the heart. Yeah. And it might look the same. It might look this very same. Your days, your life, your duties might look all the same, but your internal disposition has changed. As this realization that your identity is actually a servant of God deepens, it makes all the difference in our consciousness and in the way we move around our lives. So let's move forward to 3 and 4. 3 and 4. I will share my screen again.
Okay. For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied.
That was beautiful, but that was 5, I believe. Can we do 3 and 4 first?
I
It's up on the screen.
apologize. It kind of has almost the same beginning. But those who fully worship the unmanifested, that which lies beyond the perception of the senses, the all-pervading, inconceivable, unchanging, fixed and immovable, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, by controlling the various senses and being equally disposed to everyone, such persons, engaged in the welfare of all, at last achieve me.
Perfect.
Sorry.
No problem. So Krishna is now describing the path of worshiping the impersonal aspect of the absolute truth, right? The all-pervading spiritual reality beyond material form, right? The sun rays, right? The energy of God. And he's not criticizing. He's saying very, very clearly, people who worship my energy will ultimately attain me. So he's clear about that. But then he explains that this path involves a very difficult and highly disciplined process. Okay, you have to have strict sense control. You have to have very high levels of detachment. You have to have equal vision towards everyone. We talked about that quite a bit what that means, seeing the soul in everyone, seeing every living being as a spirit soul. You have to have steady renunciation, and you have to have deep meditation on the unmanifested absolute. And so again, Krishna's point here is not that one is good and one is bad. He's just answering Arjuna's question, which is who's most intimately connected with him. And Krishna's answer remains the same. Those who fix their mind on him personally in devotion are most intimately united with him. Others will still come to him, but it's going to be a much longer, more cumbersome, difficult, indirect process that's largely centered around renunciation, detachment, equal vision. These are tough things. And as we move on here, we're going to learn why bhakti is so much easier and more direct. The process that Krishna himself is recommending to obtain him, okay? To obtain this God realization. So now we're at 5.
Should I read it again?
Yeah,
Yes.
Let's read it again.
For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied.
Thank you. So Krishna just is becoming more explicit. He says that it's very difficult. It's very difficult. It's a very difficult path, especially for embodied souls living in the material world. So we know we are not this body. We are not this mind. Right? We are spiritual souls. And we have a body, we have a mind, but at our essence, we're actually souls. Right? But it's difficult to hear this. And it's one thing to, okay, I hear this, I believe it, but to really realize it, to really know it. And it's difficult because we naturally experience life through relationships and forms and qualities and personalities and attachments. This is our human experience. Our minds are constantly interacting with tangible things. So if we want to meditate on something that's completely impersonal, it's difficult because it's just not so relatable. It's formless. It's beyond sensory perception. It's just super abstract for most people. And a lot of times people are attracted to this because they've been a little bit tricked by material relationships in this world. We sometimes become infatuated with, worldly beauty, worldly relationships, worldly identities, and they let us down. This was my experience in the material world. It was like the next relationship was going to fill my heart. The next promotion was going to fill my heart. And then you finally get there, and then it's just like a letdown. It's great for some time, and then it's stale again. And then it's on to the next thing. And then sometimes we get a little bit bitter, a little like, okay, well, I'm fasting from relationships. I'm done with relationships. And so this idea of just like this impersonal energy is attractive. It's like, oh, finally something that's not going to hurt me. Finally something that's not going to let me down, because relationships let me down. So sometimes this becomes an important step for us. It's not even a bad thing. It's like it's meeting us where we are. This was my experience in spiritual life. I was over material relationships, and this was really attractive to me. I meditated on this impersonal energy for a few years before I started meditating on a more personal mantra. And I've shared this story before. When I started meditating on a personal mantra, I was always a meditator. Well, always. I mean, after I graduated high school, I started getting into meditation. And the impersonal was just like so much relief. It was like I was drowning. It was just all the things, all the material symptoms, anxiety, all the ups and downs of material life. It was just like drowning. And this just like brought me back up for air. It was just like very steady. But then somebody gave me the personal mantra, which we call the Maha mantra, which is Hare Krishna, the Hare Krishna mantra we chant. And automatically I felt so much more shelter. I felt like just like that relationship was so sweet. It was unlike any other that I had experienced in this world. But it was a necessary step to take this, to kind of take this time to meditate on the impersonal aspect of God, because it was so much less threatening, and in that time in my life where I wasn't ready to give my heart to another relationship. And this happens to us, our material conditionings kind of get in the way of our relationship with God. And this is really so much of our spiritual life here and our spiritual realizations in this material world is, where is our material conditioning getting in the way of our relationship with God? And our relationships with people in the world reveal so much around that. I was actually just having this conversation with Anuradha. She just got on and I thought, oh, maybe I should have. Like I have deep abandonment issues. I have deep, like some scar as conditioning. And it's something I'm aware of, something I developed as a kid in like when I had a parental relationship that was very like hot and cold. So I easily, I'm very sensitive to relationships that are hot and cold. And I was just telling Anuradha, I know this isn't spiritual, but this is my reality. Like, this is my conditioning. This is what I'm dealing with right now. And ultimately, what we'll see is whatever conditionings we bring into our worldly relationships, they're actually impacting our relationship, our highest relationship. And that is with God. So it's very sweet. These things are relationships that we have in this world can be revealing to things that we need to work on, because what happens is, if I feel abandoned, I end up abandoning myself. Right. And I end up seeing God in that way. Right. And then I end up having a very hot and cold relationship with God. So we have to be aware of these things, and they help us. So anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent. But this realization, the point is that impersonal realization, it can be a stepping stone, an important stepping stone in our spiritual growth, if we're not quite ready to give our hearts and relationships yet, which is a real thing. It's a real thing. But we have to be careful not to get stuck there. We have to be careful not to get so frustrated with material relationships that we just swing all the way to the other side and we stay there, right? To this place of just worshiping that which is formless, worshiping that which can't hurt me, which can't let me down, right? And Krishna's explaining here why this path is so difficult, because naturally the heart longs for relationship. The mind naturally seeks attachment and absorption. It's like, even if you get out of an unhealthy worldly relationship and you're sworn off relationship, it's only a matter of time before you're going to enter another one. Yeah. And hopefully you've worked on yourself a little bit so that your picker is a little bit improved, upgraded, But the point is, we're designed to long for relationship. This is how we're built. And what we're actually longing for is relationship with Creator. And what actually happens is we have this longing for this close relationship, this intimacy, and we redirect it all around us. And then we end up disappointed and we don't quite understand why. Right? And it's because that God-shaped hole in the heart can actually only be filled by God. Right? We try to cram everything else in there, but the reality is it can only be filled by God. Right? And because we have that God-shaped hole in the heart, putting God in there, it's actually very sweet. And it's actually relatively easy compared to this other path of impersonalism, which is like negating all material attachment. It's like we can't like swear off junk food but not eat healthy food. we'll just be starving. So this is, we can't say, okay, junk food made me fat, so I'm not going to eat anything. That's not the real solution. It's like, no, we have to then nourish our bodies with what it's designed for, which is healthy food, which is nourishing food. And then we feel really satisfied. So this is our material condition. We have this God-shaped hole in our heart. We've been cramming everything into it and not really feeling the ultimate fulfillment and connection. Right? And it's not that, that we need to shut off that need, because it's there. It's going to be there. We can only starve it for so long, and it's going to need to be fulfilled. But we need to put it in that God-shaped hole, what it's actually designed for, which is connection with God. Yeah, and then we'll be fulfilled. Right? So this impersonal path, it's more so emphasizes this negating material identities and material attachments, but it doesn't give the consciousness a deeply personal spiritual relationship to positively absorb itself in. Okay? So in that example where I was like drowning and then I came up for air, it's like, great, but let's not just like tread water all day and come up for air. Let's like learn to float. Let's like learn to swim. And this is personal relationship with God. So this is why Krishna gradually in the Gita, and so many chapters in the Gita that we've already covered, he always brings it back to bhakti. Because Krishna's form is not material. Okay? Krishna's form is eternal, it's pure, it's spiritually attractive. It's not like that ex-boyfriend who broke your heart and shredded into a million pieces and brought you to such a low point. This relationship will not do that to you. When the mind becomes attached to God, this attachment itself actually purifies the heart. And it weakens even our fascination with temporary worldly forms. And so the more we become attracted to God, the less we start needing to shove all of those material substitutes into the God-shaped hole in our heart. The less we become controlled by those things. Because we're becoming full. Our cup is full, so we don't have to fill it with all the muck anymore. And not naturally, all the muck is getting displaced. Because the muck, it fades, it disappoints, it changes. Attachment to God, it leads towards something eternal and ever increasing. Shraddhanjali, do you have something to share with us?
Yeah, I think too, that, if someone, even if, there's the external that have let you down. But I think I knew someone who was very agitated in her own mind, and it was sort of like when the God-shaped hole, she didn't even want to have that because she couldn't fill it. And so she wanted to just like give up her whole individuality and just merge. It's almost like, um, it's like I don't like the idea of filling that God-shaped hole, so I want to get rid of it altogether. Like, and so she took to the impersonal path to just kind of like erase her own self so she didn't have to deal with it. And sometimes I see that for in some she was a real strong example of that, of just like not wanting to have individuality, actually, which is an interesting side effect of someone maybe on that path. And I like what Srila Prabhupada said in the purport of like, yeah, you can understand some knowledge about the original nature, but the blissful portion is not realized.
Right.
So it's like, but when you get rid of yourself, you get rid of any prospect of bliss.
Right.
But it's hard to convince someone who wants to do that. It's like, there is no bliss. And it's like, no, there is. Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but I saw that it was almost like sadly, like, spiritual unaliving, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Because these two things are required for relationship, this individuality and surrender. Right? We have to be have some this we have to be individual. We have to be our individual self to engage in relationship with another. So that's required to that's like a prerequisite for this personal relationship with God, because it has to be, you can't be the same or relationship doesn't exist. And then we have to have this element of surrender. We have to be willing and ready to let God intervene in our lives. Um, yes, but if you're not interested in that individuality, I guess I would question why you're not interested in that individuality, because we experience so much bliss from connection. I mean, that's bhakti, from connection, even with others, like in healthy relationships, we experience bliss. And so if I would question, like, if you're saying you don't want to be an individual, why? Like, if your definition of bliss is misguided, or just partial, like you don't truly understand that the highest levels of bliss exist in connection. Like, even in this world, the highest levels of bliss exist in connection. When we've talked about this before, when you're with people that uplift you and that really get you, and that you can really look out down your guard and you feel like someone really understands you. And, this is a really high level of happiness. Like, you could be very poor, materially speaking, but if you have this, you're very rich. This is wisdom. Okay? So I would wonder what would make somebody not want to be an individual, I guess, would be my question in the first place. Because life teaches us that connection is the highest happiness. And then spiritual life takes it to the next level and says that connection with God is the highest of highest happiness.
Maybe a form of
Yeah.
despair.
Yeah. 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 So very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So this is in the first 6 chapters, we learned a lot about the soul, and we learned a lot about the qualities of the soul, right? And then at the end of the 6th chapter, Krishna says, the highest yogi is the one who always thinks of me with devotion. And then in this bhakti yoga section, chapter 7 through 11, that's deepening. That realization is deepening, through bhakti and relationship. So now in chapter 12, Arjuna is essentially saying, you've described both impersonal realization, this, that we're the soul, we're not this body, and you've talked about personal devotion and what is actually the highest path. And as we're going through, this answer is just becoming more and more clear, right? And that is that those who fix their mind on him personally in devotion are more naturally and intimately situated in yoga. Should we do one more verse? 6, 7. This kind of concludes this section and really brings it all home, actually. This final verse, 6, 7.
But those who worship me, giving up all their activities unto me, and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service, and always meditating upon me, having fixed their minds upon me, O son of Pritha. For them I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death.
Thank you. So now Krishna's saying something really personal about bhakti. He's saying that those who offer their work to him, who make him their ultimate goal, who remember him, who worship him, who stay connected to him with in the mood of devotion, he says for those people, he personally becomes the deliverer. And this is one of the major differences between bhakti and the impersonal path, because the impersonal path is conception, it's neutral. There's like no personal reciprocation there. There's no relationship. There's no emotion exchange. There's no loving interaction. But with Krishna, there's relationship. There's reciprocation. There's care. It's like if we imagine that someone fell into a well and there's just a rope that's hanging there, they have to grab the rope and they have to slowly climb out entirely by their own strength. There's a little notch there, the rope's hanging. But if there's actually a person above the well that's holding the rope, someone who sees them, who cares about them, who wants to help them, then the whole experience changes. Because now there's support. Now there's reciprocation. There's someone that's pulling from the other side. And this is Krishna saying, for my devotee, I become that person. He says, I become the swift deliverer. This is the sweetness of bhakti. God's not distant. He's not indifferent towards his people. He personally guides them, protects them, strengthens them, lifts them up. And this is so encouraging because, again, it's like we don't have to do it on our own and we don't have to be so perfect overnight. Like if we struggle with our conditioning, if we struggle in our meditation and in our routines, as long as we're sincerely trying to connect with God, he'll see that sincerity and he'll start helping us from within. And he doesn't only empower us from within, he personally helps carry us forward. And Krishna emphasizes something really practical here. He says it's not about what kind of work we're doing externally. It's more about the consciousness behind it. So we all have duties in this world. We all have, responsibilities, jobs, families, kids, spouses, But whatever we have, whatever duties we have, if we sincerely offer it to Krishna and try to remember him, that same work gradually becomes spiritualized. So we don't even have to change anything about our lives necessarily. We just have to change our consciousness around it. And the relationship Krishna describes here, it's almost like that between a loving parent and a child. Like a child may stumble while learning to walk, but the parent naturally wants to guide and protect, encourage, help them grow. Isn't this so much sweeter, than just like this, like, I'll do it all on my own mentality? It's just like gripping, struggling. Prabhupada would say that a personal relationship with God is like we're like a little kitten in the mouth of its mother. But the impersonal is like a monkey that's grabbing onto the stomach, a little baby monkey that's grabbing onto the stomach of his mother. It's like we don't have to try so hard. We just have to be sincere in our effort in devoting to God. And the engineer in me, I'll give you one more visual that I really appreciate, is it's like if we think of like a y-axis and like the negative portion is like material existence. We know it's tough. Material existence is tough. It's tough. We get attached to things, they go away. Even if we have the best relationship, ultimately time is going to take that too. Like it's going to go away. And this is rough. Right? So we come to this impersonal realization. This is like a zero. This is like y equals zero. It's like we don't have to suffer anymore. We don't have to struggle anymore. It's just like we can breathe. We come up for air. But spiritual connection is the positive y-axis. Right? This is where our hearts really become fulfilled. And this is personal relationship with God. Okay? It carries us. God carries us. Okay? And this is blissful. This gives us hope. And we all need hope. Because without hope, life is unbearable. But we have to choose carefully where we're placing our hope. So often we place our hope in things like pleasure, success, control, relationships, recognition, thinking that this next thing is finally going to satisfy me. This will be the thing. And this is like being lost in a desert and seeing mirages everywhere. If you place your hope in a mirage, thinking that your thirst will be satisfied, like your hope is going to eventually disappoint and eventually destroy us. This is like placing our hope in material things of this world. This isn't to be pessimistic. This is just to be realistic. Understand them in perspective. They give us some amount of happiness, but don't expect them to be the ultimate fulfillment of the heart, because they will let you down. Inevitably, it's the way material energy is designed. Understand its nature. The Gita is here to teach us its nature. Okay? They'll give us drops of happiness, but they will leave us empty and searching again. This is the nature. Krishna's saying, stop placing your deepest hope in these mirages. And Krishna's not just even a guide that's leading us towards an oasis. He himself is the oasis. He himself is the oasis in the desert. We are starving of thirst. He's the reservoir of pleasure, of love, of beauty, of meaning, of fulfillment. Everything that the soul is ultimately searching for. And bhakti yoga is the path that reconnects us to him, that reconnects us to that oasis. So if ever we feel discouraged in spiritual life, Krishna's promise here it's deeply comforting. He's saying, I'm the swift deliverer of my devotee. This hope, gives us strength to continue practicing until the heart becomes fully absorbed in him. And then we're just like swimming in that divine oasis. Our thirst is like more than quenched. We're swimming. We're swimming in the divine oasis that is love of God. And that's what's available for all of us on this path, if we stick to it sincerely and with determination. This fruit, this love of God is available for us all in this lifetime, even in this lifetime. So that's all that I had for you today. I would love to hear some reflections, additions, corrections. Please share. Kay, please share with us, Kay.
Today's lecture was, I never thought about impersonalist or why to think about formless when that's not my cup of tea kind of thing. But, today's lecture about this gave a broader perspective. I mean, it is now making us think, why would somebody want that? But Krishna is, I mean, my perception is Krishna is giving, okay, if you want this, this is also available, this is also available. But then, like you said, it's about the x-axis and the y-axis. You come from the negative, at least you're coming up from the negative to breathe, and you're here at the impersonal. If that is what you want, then take that. But for us, we don't want that, and we want more the connection. Today's lecture was more about connection and all that. So how and so many aspects of bhakti we discussed today. God is the oasis, and personal relationship with God, and how the soul is longing to be with this reservoir, to be with this oasis. And we don't acknowledge that okay, we are longing for that. We are just doing something else to fill that gap. But ultimately, that gap is going to be filled only by connecting to Krishna. And the personal relationship, not the formless, but the form is so connecting, because if we connect with that, we get everything that we are looking for. That is what was so nice. And connection, that was the main thing today.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Margot, it's good to see you again, dear.
Oh, sorry, I'm driving, but I'm almost ready to park. But So thank you for this affirmation. I'm just going to share a quick story. So can you hear me or not really?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah. Um, as a young girl, I couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. I remember I was mute as a child, selectively mute, but nonetheless mute. And so, talking for me was like this full-on anxiety panic attack. Um, but I remember I was raised in a Christian home, and I remember just being in church, right, and just feeling alone and all the things that you feel like as a child who, you know, kind of was always on the outs. And I just felt the love of God, of Krishna. And at that time, it was like Jesus just enter me, and I never felt alone after that moment. And it's just been this complete space of devotion. Of course, for a short period of time, 10 years of my life, I kind of abandoned it, because I was told something else that God is. And I'm like, that's not who God is. And that's the God. I'm not going to be around that God, because my God is loving and joy and loves me so much and loves everything. And so this is where and who and I've been practicing from in this devotion to the divine. And to find this bhakti path maybe about 3, 4, 5 years ago has been such a gift. And so just hearing this morning, it's just such an affirmation. And yeah, so thank you so much. And that's pretty much what I want to say to that, because it saved me it saved me so, so many times. And all I want to do is share this with the world. Like, this is the path. This is the path. Like, this love and whatever your relationship with the divine. It doesn't have to be the same as mine, but create whatever it is. Like, open that love in your heart in a deep way. So thank you. Thank you.
Wow. Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Christianity is bhakti. It's beautiful. Thank you. Anybody else? The other realizations or shares? I actually find myself attracted to the impersonal aspect sometimes. That's just like a one that's I get pretty frustrated with relationships and I'm a runner, so I'm like, okay, let's just pause this. Um, so this has been the was a stretch for me when I got into it, and it continues to be. It always stretches me in different ways. Because you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have to keep trying. And the beauty is that Krishna sees our effort and carries us. And that's been my experience in bhakti. It's like when you feel like you're just like struggling, nothing's adding up, you're not getting anywhere, Krishna will just lift you up. And it's so sweet. We don't have to do it alone. That's the whole point. Right? That's the whole point. Aaron.
Hare Krishna. Um, I just want to share my appreciation for the point you made about perfection. Because I don't know whether it's like perfection or similarly like the expectations I have, and specifically the expectations I have of God. But I do think I, often fall into this trap of, like, you chant for a certain number of years and you chant for a certain number of rounds, and it's just like I should be progressing in this way and getting closer to this love of God, and it should look a particular way or feel a particular way. And I know those are like my own, everything that I'm bringing to the table and bringing to the relationship. It almost feels sometimes uh, as if like you're like staring straight ahead looking for God, and he's like everywhere, but you're just staring at this one spot. So yeah, I do feel like just like that permission to like let go of you like analyzing your progress or like critiquing where you're at. Because even like in thinking about sharing this, it's like, well, I don't really feel like I've made no progress. I just think after a certain period of time, I'm sure there's like an exponential, start, and then you can't stay at that level forever. And so I feel like, yeah, it's like how to like just like manage my own expectations, but also, grow that faith that like, it's just the everyday showing up to the path. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. Yeah, it's funny, like when we have a relationship like with our spouse, we're not like so fixated on our progress in the relationship. We're not like, okay, how are we metering up to, like, have we spent enough time together? I mean, to some aspect maybe, but we're really more focused on that connection. Like, how are we feeling in relationship with it? Are we enjoying our time together? It's like a feeling, are we feeling connected? And that comes from like enjoying each other's company and doing things together and sharing our hearts. And so, like, in some ways, we could think about our relationship with God more like that. And bhakti is such a beautiful path because it's fun. It's fulfilling to the heart. Like, we don't have to get so caught up in our head, and we shouldn't, because that's not really what it's about. We want to have the knowledge so that we can open the heart. But that's the point of the knowledge. We don't need to get so stuck on like, am I progressing? Or it's about relationship. So invest your heart in the relationship. And to the degree that you invest your heart in your relationship, naturally, like any healthy relationship, you'll see a reciprocation. And that will be your sign of progress. You don't have to like measure it or, I guess that would be bhakti is supposed to be fun. This is a beautiful thing. It's not supposed to be, we don't have to sit in like austerity and pull back our senses and deprive ourselves like so many like different like other paths. It's fun. Our heart is connected. We're feeling uplifted. We're feeling connected. We're feeling fulfilled. Don't let your head get in the way of that, because that will pull you out of it. Right. I don't know if that makes sense, but I would say just like go to kirtan tonight and put your hands up and just like dance in bliss and forget what you're stuck on about your progress, your so-called progress. And I'll be honest, Aaron, I feel it's funny that you say this because it's like you're so committed. I see you as like, so it's interesting that you have this kind of narrative in your head because you're always willing and eager for service. You show up to all of these things. You have the qualities of a spiritualist. You're kind, you're compassionate. So it's funny that this thing is your head is holding you back.
I think it's both like I have this in material ways as well, but like it's like that feeling of like never doing enough. Like you could always be doing more or whether it's quality or quantity, just like, yeah, but
give it to God.
But that's my baggage.
No, and you know what? Some days like I won't have chanted all my rounds or like I won't have time to do all the things I want. And it's like those are days I'm like, God, I'm really sorry. Can you arrange something in my life that like these are the days that even in those moments you can seek shelter of God and your connection and you can relish connection with God. That's progress. It's like it's just how much are we looking back? Are we reaching up towards God instead of seeking shelter in our old defaults? That's progress. Yeah. Beautiful. Did I see one more hand up? Shashank, you wanna
Yeah.
one last share for us?
Yeah. So while doing bhakti and when we are following this, and we are really happy that whatever we are doing, but don't you think that sometimes there are other things in our lives that is really breaking, but still will only doing bhakti really try to make good there. Suppose you are having some issues with your spouse, or be it with your parents, or be it at the workplace, and I say, oh, I am doing bhakti, everything should be, it is not happening that way, right? So how do we really focus on this? Because we understand, because it's inner self that we are getting healed, and we are getting to know, we are getting knowledgeable, but the surrounding us, right, the environment, they are not as uh, empathetic, or be it like they are not as knowledgeable, because they might not have gone through this Gita. They are not like, okay, everything is his things, and we are just medium in his plan. They don't know this. So how do we really work with such kind of people, and how do we progress?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. And this is a difficult part of the path for sure. And to the degree that we become sincere and committed and determined in our path, Krishna will take care of these things for us. I understand in the meantime, it feels like it doesn't feel that way. It feels messy. It feels like, this relationship is struggling because now I'm into this. But if, as we get connected to God, we will become purified. And in that, we will be able to show up to those relationships and those situations more compassionately, more loving, more, more accepting. And it may not always feel like that for the person on the other side, my relationship with my mom. We used to be super, super close, like the same person. And as I got into this, I started realizing like I wanted something a little bit different for my life. And she definitely felt that. And that was like scary. It was scary for both of us. It doesn't like that doesn't always feel good, that process. But in the end, I see now my mom even stepping up a lot more in her own life, being more of an advocate for herself and being more loving and compassionate for herself and others, even though our relationship doesn't look the same as it used to. So there's like, I think Stella said patience. Like there's going to be some time that things are uncomfortable as people get used to the new normal. But if the new normal is you showing up more loving and compassionately than you did before, it will even out. And you will show up more loving and compassionately if you are sincerely following the process with a sincere and open heart. That's because that's what happens. When we associate with God, we become purified and we become more aware of our eternal identity, and we live more from that place, which is a lot more loving and compassionate. So it's inevitable. But in the meantime, we have to give other people time, because it's weird, it's strange, it's threatening. You're not the same person that they, related with, and that's scary. So hold space for that. That doesn't mean that you give in and you go down that rabbit hole of things that you used to do with them that you're no longer interested in, or behaviors that you used to bring to the relationship that aren't so elevating to you anymore. You don't have to give in, but at the same time, understand where they are and give them space and love in that place. Hold space for that, because that's hard. That's hard. We can't expect them to just be where we are. That's not loving compassionately and compassion. We have to let them be where they are and hold space for that. Love them anyway. And they'll come in their own time. Guaranteed. They'll come in their own time. It may not be as fast as you want, but you will see just by being that example, because that is the power of association. Most scriptures tell us association, just 1 minute association with a great soul, can change the entire trajectory of your life. And we know this, people that we're around that lift us up, that make us feel like better versions of ourselves. Be that better version of yourself. Be that example for others, and they will see it and they will follow to the degree that you're committed. I hope that makes sense. Great question. Thank you, Shashank. It's good to have you here in our community. Okay, my friends, that is our time. We ran over, so we should get going. But I will see you all on Monday, and Sunday we have guided japa, so please join us on Zoom for that. And thank you all for coming and sharing your hearts and walking this path together.
Thank
Have a great
you.
weekend.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.